Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to talk about all things pharmacy with Alec Ginsberg, who leads the pharmacy at the oldest apothecary in the United States. You have likely heard of it, C.O. Bigelow, which has been in his family since the Great Depression. Alec, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan. I just got your book yesterday. I'm very excited to read it.
Thank you. Yeah. So I actually found you via your excellent newsletter, Drugstore Cowboy, which I will link in our show notes for our listeners. And I just love the way you break down very complex issues in pharmacy, not from an outsider's perspective studying it, but from an insider's perspective, but in a way that's really easy for all of us to understand. Tell me about what you do. Maybe what does the average day look like for you?
Like you mentioned, I run CO Bigelow. I'm the fourth generation. I am a pharmacist, but pharmacist and owner of the store. It's in the West Village. Been here since 1838. My great-grandfather bought it in 1939. And we are a fully functioning independent pharmacy. I would say one of the busier ones in America. And because of the area that we're in, we deal with a very wide, interesting range of patients. So we're right next to NYU. We've got plenty of a geriatric population who's been living here for like 50 plus years since, the Bob Dylan days, the Stonewall era riots and things like that. And then we also, West Village, is known for being, quite a wealthy area as well, a lot of celebrities. So we kind of take care of the who's who of New York as well, who care deeply about their privacy and keeping their health information private. I like to say I'm the concierge pharmacist for like the who's who of New York City. And part of that is that I find myself every day explaining pharmacy things or healthcare to some of the smartest people in America. So I'm about to hit my 10-year anniversary full-time at Bigelow. And I kind of realized every day I was explaining what is a prior authorization or like what your copay actually means, even the most basic healthcare ideas to like people I see on CNBC, explaining the most complex topics. And I was like, I actually got pretty good at, I hate to say dumbing it down, but dumbing down really complex healthcare subjects. And I was like, maybe I can spend, in 5 minutes or less a week, break down one sort of topic and do it for the masses, which is how Drugstore Cowboy was born. So that's my side project where I'm just trying to use my position as, the CO Bigelow pharmacist and the connections that I have to get the word out and actually try to make healthcare a little bit better for everybody, which I know you're trying to do as well based on the title of your book.
Very aligned.
Yeah. So it's just been a fun kind of thing. And as you can tell from my writing, I'm born and raised in New York and I very much write exactly the way that I talk. No BS, no frills. And it's how I've learned to do it, from breaking stuff down to people that are pressed for time, but also want to learn about things at my pharmacy.
So in that pharmacist role, how has that changed since is it great-grandfather, father, then you? Like, talk me through how the role of the pharmacist has changed and how it looks different today.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to answer this is to explain sort of what an apothecary is, which is a term that has really been twisted over the years. And now it's totally lost like the real meaning of what it was.
Well, Schitt's Creek, right?
Exactly. Yeah. People bring that up all the time. So, I don't think most people realize that like modern medicine is a very recent thing. And what I mean when I say that is like, we are so accustomed to, you go to the doctor and he writes you a prescription from a list of thousands of medications that are commercially manufactured that the pharmacy has and can purchase and gives to you. But like, to me, that only started in around World War II with the invention of penicillin. Before that, there weren't like lots of commercially produced medications that a doctor could just choose from. What they would do is doctors and pharmacists had formulas that they would write up. You actually see an old school formula book right behind me where like, if you had itchy skin, Dr. Alec had his itchy skin formula and you would come to Bigelow's and we were an apothecary and you would sit there all day while I cut up, some plants in the back and used the mortar and the pestle and gifted it to you.
Yeah.
If you came from CO Bigelow, wrapped beautifully. And like, that's what medicine was. Over the years, when medications became commercially available, the role of the pharmacist turned you hear the term chemist, like those were chemists. That's why we're CO Bigelow chemists and an apothecary. Over time, once medications became commercially available, pharmacist's role primarily the way we think about it shifted to like more of a dispensing role. And that's why nowadays, like if I meet somebody new and they don't know, Bigelow, and I say I'm a pharmacist, I see in their eyes like them imagining me in a white coat at CVS, just like counting pills and handing them a bottle. I think, unfortunately, to most of like Gen Z or even, even younger millennials, like that's what a pharmacist is, just somebody dispensing. And that's sort of what the role has been pigeonholed into, but pharmacists are trained to do so much more. I mean, we have doctorate degrees, we go to school for 4 years. And I think we're in this interesting position now where the pharmacy world is changing. I'm sure we're going to talk about why pharmacies are closing and things like that. And
Yeah.
we have an opportunity to craft what the pharmacist of the future looks like, whether that's providing clinical services or managing medications. For a long time, pharmacists got by just making money on dispensing. And now, unfortunately, we're shifting away from that because of forces beyond our control, like PBMs and reimbursements. And we're going to have to figure out what the pharmacist role looks like. So to answer your question,
Hair
we're
clips,
now,
right?
yeah, exactly. So now I think any pharmacies that are planning to stay open, like my own, we're trying to figure out what the new source of revenue is, because it's not going to be
Mm,
dispensing anymore. We
yeah.
have to shift what the primary focus of pharmacy is. And I have a lot of ideas about
Yeah.
what that is.
So before we get into that, and I do want to talk a lot about this, the business of pharmacy. So between your great grandfather and you, it's really moving from a chemist role to with your own kind of formulas, testing things out for patients, to more of a dispensing role. Between your father and you, what would you say is the biggest difference?
So I think it boils down to one sentence, and it still is kind of that dispensing shift. But I would say up until about 5, 10 years ago, when I got heavily involved in running the business, the rule in pharmacy was the more prescriptions you fill, the more money you make. And that's not the case anymore. Actually, the biggest representation of this to me is that my pharmacy, for the longest time, for about 20 years, we had a robot in the pharmacy called a Parata, Parata. You may have heard of the company before. And if you've ever been in the pharmacy or seen one of those giant robots that like counts pills, puts them in a bottle, labels them, it was an automated dispenser and it holds like your top 200 drugs. So it replaced a lot of pharmacy technician work. Contrary to popular belief, pharmacists aren't the ones really counting and putting pills in the bottle. That's kind of a technician thing, and the pharmacists do the final checks. But we had a robot that did that for many years, and the idea was like we were filling so many prescriptions and we wanted to fill more, so it made sense to pay for this really expensive robot that over time would make the investment back. We actually just 2 months ago got rid of our Parata robot that we got in, I think 2006 was when we got it in the
Wow.
pharmacy. And it's
What, did it have a
because
name? It was like part of the team.
we just called it Parata. I don't know.
Parada. All
I'm
right.
sure other pharmacies
Yeah.
call it that, but and most independent pharmacies have one of these robots of some sort, like any of the big fillers like
Yeah.
Capsule. Their whole warehouse is just full of these things. And we decided it's not worth it anymore. We were paying a large maintenance fee per month and we were going to have to replace it. It was going to cost like $150,000. And I said, you know what? We're not in the business anymore of just filling as many prescriptions as possible. We have to refocus ourselves on profitable prescriptions and helping people navigate the
Hmm.
healthcare landscape, shifting to clinical services. I'm sure we'll talk about that. People
Yeah.
now have, fortunately, you can't just get all your meds from one place. If cost is really your concern, you're going to
Hmm.
get, I think in the future, which is now, you're going to get your GLP from Lilly Direct or from Hims or Ro. You're going to use maybe, one of the Trump RX coupons for a brand name that you really need, or Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs for the cheapest generic. And then if you need an antibiotic, you're going to your local pharmacy. Like, I think now if you're a local pharmacy, you have to look for other ways besides just filling everybody's prescriptions, because they're not going to come to you for that unless you're
Interesting.
really
Yeah.
proving that your value is much, much better than anywhere else you're going to go.
So you want to focus on filling the most profitable scripts, but you don't get to choose. Like I come to you with my script, like you kind of have to fill it, no? Or do you
Yeah.
is
So I
it
wrote about like one case, which is a guy who's come to my pharmacy for 20 plus years. I have a close relationship with him. He fills 11 medications a month. He's like a 75-year-old who lives on his own, needs us to help him manage everything. Unfortunately, we were just losing so much money on his medications. And one of the reasons why was that he takes a brand name HIV medication that we would spend like $2,000 a month on to buy and lose money on every month. And that's a guy who, like, I can go to him and say, listen, I still want to manage your medications and help you with all this. This one medication we just cannot do anymore. But I've found the pharmacy that will fill it for you. I will help coordinate it, basically I will be your, son taking care of this for you, your healthcare provider. And I will facilitate getting it to you from somewhere else, but will still be your main healthcare hub.
And
And
is
I
that
think,
somewhere else losing money on it, or is that somewhere else able to acquire it
well,
for a lower
you know,
cost?
it all depends. I think if it's a, vertically integrated PBM wholesaler specialty pharmacy, then they're making money somehow through it. And even if they weren't, I don't really care because I have zero sympathy for the vertically integrated networks. But there are also, like in New York City, there's a nonprofit that fills HIV medications. So they're kind of okay losing a little bit of money on it. But in general, the specialty pharmacies that are owned by the PBMs are not allowed to force you to use the pharmacy of their choice, but they can make it incredibly advantageous to you. So they can say, if you go to CO Bigelow, your copay will be $100, but if you use our mail order specialty pharmacy, it'll cost you nothing. And because they get to set their reimbursements, because the PBM owns them, they'll make a little bit on that transaction, whereas we will lose. So they're not technically forcing you, but they're making us and the patient incredibly inconvenienced for us filling that prescription.
That sounds anti-competitive.
I would say so, yeah, and that's kind of our big gripe. And
Yeah.
Mark Cuban, who I know you've had on here, is very, very vocal about this practice as well.
Yeah. So where in the business are you feeling most squeezed? Is it wholesalers, PBMs, manufacturers? Like
I
who's
think
made it
it's
hardest?
it's definitely the PBMs, and I would say, we could talk for hours and do a whole series about each piece and who's taking
Yeah.
what, but the PBMs, absolutely. I think if I
And
was asked the
sorry,
question,
let's stop. PBM, pharmacy benefit manager. Maybe give like a one line about
yeah,
what
yeah.
they are for our listeners that aren't aware.
Pharmacy benefit managers are the biggest companies in the world. And really the reason why I started writing my newsletter was I kind of thought to myself, nobody knows that these companies exist, and they're the most influential, largest companies in everybody's life in America. And I'll explain, I have a perfect, I've nailed my elevator pitch dumb down of exactly how they work and what they
Awesome.
do.
Yes. All right.
So PBMs, let's say Express Scripts, OptumRx, Caremark. Those are the three biggest PBMs in America. They control 80% of all prescriptions in the United States. If you're listening to this, you most likely, your insurance card says one of their names on it. Caremark's owned by CVS, owns Express Scripts, and OptumRx is owned by United Health. That's where these vertically integrated networks come from. And when I say they own 80% of the prescriptions in the United States, 80% of all prescriptions filled in the US are processed by these PBMs. So if they're not your insurance, what do they actually do? PBMs are hired by insurance companies essentially to make their formularies. A formulary is the list of medications that are covered by your insurance plan. So like when you go to the pharmacy and they say, this is a tier 1 drug, or, this is covered, but this isn't, that's all negotiated by your PBM. They're the ones who decide that. And how do they decide that? We'll use Lipitor as an easy example because everybody's kind of heard of it. So Lipitor is a drug that treats cholesterol, high cholesterol. Crestor is another one. Livalo is another one. So your PBM has to cover one of these medications. They don't have to cover all of them. So they go to the manufacturer of each of these medications and they say, listen, Optum will say to them, listen, we control 30% of all the prescriptions in America for cholesterol. Why should we make your drug the one that's on our formulary over the other ones? Essentially, they're saying, how much money are you going to pay us in a rebate to make yours the preferred drug? And then they go to the other company and say, this company is going to pay us this much. What are you going to pay us? And essentially, this is the problem with healthcare in the United States.
Has nothing to do with the effectiveness. It's all to do with like
Zero.
which pharma is going to give them the biggest kickback.
It's essentially an auction per formulary, and we call these rebates. So it's like basically,
Rebate for who though? It's the rebate for the PBM.
Right. So essentially, a manufacturer sets a price. Drug companies are made to be the enemy because drug prices are so high. But really, they wouldn't have to set their prices so high if it weren't for these rebates. The drug companies set the price at what they think is fair, and then they're like, "Oh no, we have to pay a rebate to the PBM on this drug in order to make it approved on their formulary. So we have to jack the price up, and that entire jack up price that goes straight to the pharmacy benefit manager, and that's how these companies make so much money. So in the same way as they're squeezing the drug manufacturers, they come to the pharmacies, and we don't have to work with the PBMs. We sign a contract with each of them that says you will approve claims that are submitted by our pharmacy. And when we sign that contract, that we have to agree on rates that they'll pay us back for medications. Unfortunately, they pay us less than we pay for medications on all brands, and certainly a lot of the medications that we fill in the pharmacy. So for those, if I sign contracts with the three biggest PBMs and I fill prescriptions for them, unfortunately, I'm going to lose money on those scripts. So you would ask, why would I do that? Well, it's either I don't fill 80% of the prescriptions that come into the pharmacy because I didn't sign a contract with their PBM, or I just have to accept that I'm going to lose money on.
On which percent? What percent would you lose money on?
So I encourage you, I think 3 weeks ago, I wrote an article on Drugstore Cowboy where I literally opened my pharmacy's books wide open, and I showed exactly what we pay and what we took in for insurance claims, for non-insurance claims.
Love that
Brand
transparency.
brand drugs are the worst. And we spent, I think, $13 million last year buying brand name drugs for our patients through these big three PBMs, and our profit margin was okay. So I'm not exaggerating when I say we lose money. I mean, no other business in the world would that be okay. Now, when I blend together everything and the, generics as well, we wind up making about 10-12% profit margin, before costs and everything. But like, that's why we still sign the contract. Because at the end of the day, we do wind up making a little bit. But that used to be closer to 20-25%, and it shrunk a little bit year
When was
by
that?
year. uh,
What time was it?
10 plus years ago.
Okay, not long ago. Yeah.
So you probably remember a time where like you went to the pharmacy and it was just like your generic copay is this and your brand copay is this. That's how your insurance works. Like in those days, the pharmacies were making a lot of money because the pricing was fair. And then over time, our profit margins have shrunk little by little. So I think now we're getting to the breaking point where pharmacies, like over the past year, you've seen so many pharmacies close, like long time
Thousands,
ones,
yeah.
because we finally hit the breaking point where it's just not possible to keep your pharmacy going anymore. Bigelow survives in a large part because we do a lot of a cash business because of the nature of the area that we're in, but also we have our beauty business, our cosmetics business, as you referenced. But a big precipitator of this is the GLP-1s, because we don't have to hammer home the point that like we've never seen a craze like the GLP-1 craze before, but every GLP-1 can cost $1,300 to $2,000 a box. And if we're losing money on those, I think the first Drugstore Cowboy article I ever wrote was about my pharmacy's GLP-1 problem, where I showed we spent over like $2.5 million the previous year on buying Ozempic for our patients, and we lost $26,000 filling it. I mean, that's a cash flow problem.
Yeah.
In a business. It's not sustainable.
So weird to be in a business where you are forced to buy at a certain price and forced to sell at another price. You have no negotiation on either end.
Yeah. And what's really funny is like, we'll avoid politics as much as possible.
No, we
but
don't have to avoid politics.
we have to talk about Trump RX because
We do.
it's the big
Yes.
thing. But, Trump RX, however I felt about him, it's like, as an unbiased opinion, do I think it's a great thing? Not really. However, it actually is getting us more money than we got before in a crazy way. Cause like now we're breaking dead even as opposed to losing a little bit, which is an insane thing to say. Like that's the big win of the year. We're breaking even on prescriptions instead of losing on them.
Yeah. Well, and the attention that he's bringing to drug pricing, I think, is helpful. But there was a stat analysis of Trump RX, and they looked at a number of drugs listed and found that even if they were, the brand name was cheaper, what they failed to do was mention that there were generics as alternatives. And there's no transparency around that.
I think in its current form, like, it's probably barely being used. I will say the fertility drugs is an amazing deal for a lot of people who
Yeah.
can't get fertility covered. Like I have friends who are saving money using it in that sense. But most of the drugs that are on there are irrelevant. But I do think, like you said, it's bringing attention, and hopefully it will lead to more deals. I mean, clearly it's had, I don't know if it's Trump RX in general, or just the attention, but like the prices of GLPs have come down.
Yeah.
And funnily
Quickly.
enough, yeah,
Quickly.
funnily enough, the
Yeah.
only people that it really is making a huge difference for are like people like the pharmacies, because the price that we're buying is the price that's coming down. Patients who are using their insurance, they're not seeing any difference in the price. It's only cash paying
Yeah.
customers. But the pharmacies are the ones who are now paying less, and every dollar counts. You know, like I just said, that's our cash flow. So it has made a big difference for us.
So walk me through. I come to your pharmacy, I spend $100 on a prescription where you said about 10%. So $10 goes to you. Where does the $90 go?
So a couple things that people should understand. One is that a pharmacy, like how do we get our drugs? So a pharmacy is contracted with drug wholesalers. We can't just like go on a website and click and be like, yeah, send me oxycodone. You know, so AmerisourceBergen is one of the
Cardinal.
wholesalers that my
Yeah.
pharmacy, Cardinal's another one. So we have
Also
deals
huge companies, by the way. Some of the
enormous
largest, like top 15 biggest companies. Yeah.
and vertically integrated with the insurance and the PBMs. It's all a big family affair. So when I want to buy, you come into my pharmacy because you want an Ozempic. How do I get that drug? I go to my wholesaler, AmerisourceBergen, and I buy an Ozempic from them, and they deliver it to the pharmacy. Now the price is set by the wholesaler. We have certain deals with them where like if we buy a certain amount, the price, a percentage is taken off the price, or like if we buy a certain percentage of generic drugs, because that's where they make most of their money, then they'll cut the price down of, give us a rebate or something. Those are private deals. But anyway, we buy our drugs from a wholesaler. But those prices are like the stock market. They change every day, not by like 50%,
Yeah.
but like a couple dollars here and there.
And these are like their business model is really financing. It's forward buying, right? Like they're buying,
Exactly.
hoping the prices go up. And I mean, it's kind of it's not really a healthcare business model.
It's commodities almost. But
Yeah.
so those prices are changing. So it's not set, it's not standardized. Every pharmacy is paying a different price based on their personal contract, the size, the volume that they buy. Anyway, so we get that drug on the shelf. You come to the pharmacy, you give us a prescription for Ozempic, you give us your PBM, your insurance. We bill your insurance. Now, what that means is we send a instantaneous electronic message to your PBM, and we say, Halle's here to get this drug. We paid this much for it. And then instantaneously, they send us a message back and say, okay, charge her $10 for her copay, and then we're going to pay you, $700, and you'll get this in like 30 to 90 days. That's another aspect of this. Like we're laying out
You're
cash and waiting
financing
90
it.
days to
Yeah.
get this back. That's an interest-free loan that we're providing, these companies. But, when they send that message back, oftentimes we're losing money on the amount, and we have no recourse for that. At the end of the day, we're just one pharmacy. Like they'll just cut us off if we become a pain in the ass. Big pharmacies like CVS or the chains, they have negotiating power. We have like a group of other independent pharmacies
Yeah.
that we belong to, and we negotiate together, but like we really don't have that much say, because at the end of the day, they would prefer all their patients to fill with the pharmacies they own, the mail orders. Back to the $100 spend. They say, charge the patient this copay. That copay goes directly to the pharmacy. We keep that. Could be zero, could be $10, whatever. And then we wait for the rest of the reimbursement from the PBM. Now, I used to really like, I'm sure you've seen that diagram. It sounds like you're referencing it, like how much of $100 spend on prescriptions goes to
Yeah.
each
I
piece.
have it in my book, but now I'm wondering if it's not totally the best
No, I think
explanation.
it's good, but it leaves out the most critical part, which is what we just talked about, the rebates. Like that diagram makes it seem like the pharmacy and the PBM each pull like $2 or $3 from that $100 spend,
Yeah.
which technically isn't wrong. But the missing piece is that the PBM on the side has negotiated an enormous rebate from the manufacturer that comes out at the end. that $100 price is really like $2,000, and that's because of the rebates that are negotiated
Yeah,
by
there's like
the
another
PBMs.
bucket of money that's coming into the yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
What is funny though is that like pharmacists are the front facing part of the healthcare system. Like I think there's some stat that's like you see your pharmacist 33 times a year and your doctor twice or something like that. So like when
Yeah, that's
people
true.
are angry about a prescription price or something, we bear the brunt of it all the time,
Mm.
even though it really has nothing to do with us because
It
we're the
led you to
people that
start
are
a
there.
newsletter. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it is going back to the very beginning of this conversation, like, what are the opportunities for pharmacists? I think education is such an important and overlooked part of our job. I say to my staff all the time, if a patient leaves the pharmacy angry at the pharmacy, it's our fault, like, because we didn't explain what's going on. And that is where Drugstore Cowboy was born from. Like, if somebody comes in and they didn't get what they want for they're getting screwed over by an insurance or a price or a PA or something, even though I can't like solve that problem always for them, if I teach them why, they're extremely appreciative. And then you have a customer for life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a super important thing
Yeah.
about pharmacy.
So we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but independent pharmacies are disappearing. I read that one closed every single day in 2023. But the big box retailers have also struggled. We saw CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid not only shut down a lot of their stores in the last few years, but a lot of turnover with their CEOs. Um, like if independents are dying and chains are closing their stores, like who is winning?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll point out about that is the one chain who fully closed was Rite Aid. And why? Because they're the only one that wasn't vertically integrated.
Uh,
CVS is owned
yeah.
by CVS has CVS Caremark, the PBM, they have their specialty pharmacy,
Yep.
they have
Aetna.
wholesalers they work with. Like all these companies, are vertically integrated. Rite Aid was the only one who had to shut down because they were in the
It's a
dispensing
really good
business
point.
and no other part of it. The other ones, I think part of the reason why stores are closing is not pharmacy related. It's retail related, and that like the quality of the stores, I can say this as a retailer, is just not what it used to be. And people are buying stuff from Amazon rather than like going to their local CVS. But also the dispensing business is hurting and people have lots of other options. So we can certainly talk about those. I'm sure you bring them up all the time, like whether it's getting your drugs from Amazon, Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs, him, Roman, all
Yeah.
these options, GoodRx, now the DTC like Lilly Direct, and the drug companies are offering them themselves. I think we're going to see more and more of these. I will say that like there's not a lot of money in dispensing commercial medications, whether it's using insurance or not. Like even Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs, like he's selling, a generic drug for $3 and shipping it across the country. Like you don't have to be a genius to think to yourself, like, is he making anything on this? So these companies are going to have to figure out how to sell other things. So like in the case of Hims and Roman, they're charging you $150 a month to get the prescription for whatever else they're selling you for. And I think people just don't realize that a lot of these things are available to them much cheaper. They've built a fancy UX and a great marketing team that, brings people in. And I have nothing against that. All the more power to them. But I think these companies are now all the fad, but they're going to learn very quickly. Like a perfect example is a company like Capsule. In the late 2010s, like you couldn't open your eyes in New York City without seeing a Capsule ad. And now you don't hear that much about them. They do still operate, but it was just prescription delivery with a great app. And I always said to myself, like, I know how much money it costs to fill a prescription and deliver it in New York City. Like, there's no way that they think that that's a path to profitability. They need to do other things. So I guess they were trying to sell over the counter medications. And I just, I don't want to speak to their business because I don't really know it, but like I used to see a lot of their ads everywhere and I don't anymore. And I used to hear about people using them and I don't anymore. But you look at a company like Roe or Hims, and we'll get to the compounding side of that after, but
Yeah.
like even separate from that, they're selling over the counter medications. They're selling topical minoxidil and finasteride. Like those are things that, like Rogaine that you buy over the counter, like they're selling some items that you can make a margin on. So I don't know what this is going to look like in 10 years, but I think all the low dollar fills are going to be stolen by Amazon and Mark Cuban
Yeah.
because there's just no reason to pay. Even like I think Hims charges like $30 a month for a minoxidil script. Like you can buy that from Amazon for $2. Like I don't care how good the UX is. Once people, I just think people don't like haven't realized that yet. And I think
They're becoming vertically integrated. You could argue that that's kind of like the strategy that has worked in healthcare. They're getting paid for writing the script. They're owning the compounding pharmacy that's making the drug, and then they're making money
notably
off that
though,
drug, right?
notably though, there's no insurance
No
involved.
insurance, like
Yeah,
very anti-insurance.
which is a huge
It
part of
wouldn't
why
work.
it's
It wouldn't work.
successful.
Yeah.
Now, I think, and we can get into this now. This is a big point with me, the compounding
Yep.
aspect of
Let's
it,
talk
which
about it.
is super complicated for me as a pharmacist because I have my one viewpoint for me is that I am a pharmacist. I believe that pharmacists are very smart, capable people whose roles need to be expanded. And I don't want to make it seem like I don't believe pharmacists are capable of compounding medications. We do compounding at CO Bigelow. We talked about the inventive modern medicine. Like before that, all pharmacists was compounding. And when I'm going to talk negatively about compounding, it has nothing to do with that. I believe that pharmacists are capable of making medications. But my number one concern as a healthcare professional is the advancement of modern medicine, period. I hate big pharma as much as the next guy, but unfortunately, that's how we advance medicine. They make a lot of money on on the drugs that they create. They invest it into research and development. And then that's how like Ozempic is invented. That's how, cancer is cured, things like that. Now, the way that works, if people don't understand, is that drugs, when a drug company invents a drug, they get a patent on that drug. They get protected for, it's like 15 to 20 years. It depends when the drug comes to market. But essentially what it adds up to is that they have around 5 years of exclusivity where nobody is allowed to make the same drug that they came out with. And that's how they make all their money back, make a nice juicy profit, and they invest all that into the next drug that costs $2 billion and 15 years of trial and error to develop. Now, what happened with the GLPs is that compounding has always existed. It's not a new thing. It's just that like it was never profitable. Not that it wasn't profitable, but like there wasn't a GLP craze like there is now to
And it
drive
wasn't done at
this.
scale.
Exactly.
It was done like a specific use case or a specific customer that had an allergy that needed to be.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't multi-billion-dollar public companies weren't being started on compounding. Like you could come to Bigelow, you still can today if you want like a hemorrhoid cream that they don't make, we'll make it for you, or we'll make something for a cat or a kid in a liquid form that can't be done as a solid. But compounding, what happened, and I don't want to rehash this, I'm sure you've talked about it before, but like the GLPs went on shortage and the compounding pharmacies were able to temporarily fill in the blanks. And essentially this just ran wild for like a year to 2 years where the government allowed compounding pharmacies to make GLP-1s because there was a shortage of them. And what happened was the overnight, like hundreds of these compounding pharmacies sprouted up, which is dangerous in its own right because they were the speed, you can't cut corners with this stuff. We've seen what happens before with like the New England Compounding Center when they were trying to speed processes up to make a profit. They wound up giving meningitis to people and people died. This was in the early 20s. So like we're still making injections here, even if they're not IV. And the speed at which these compounding pharmacies were built, there's no way that it was safe. Anyway, that's besides the point. Now we're in a position where the compounding world is so big and the drugs are no longer on shortage, but the government has gutted the FDA and essentially like the medicine has far surpassed the rules and the oversight. So the business got too big and we can't control it anymore. So that's what you're seeing play out in public with like Hims versus Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. Now, we'll get to that battle in a second, but back to what I was saying about my worry with the advancement of medicine. What this has all done is broken down the patent protection system that all of modern medicine is built upon. So these companies, let's say, talk about tirzepatide, Zepbound, the newest GLP. Eli Lilly should technically have time to make money back from everything they invested into creating this drug, and then use that to create the next 7 drugs that they want to make. And that'll be good for all of society. Except Hims has now used a bunch of loopholes, and I'm just using them by name because they're the biggest one. But these compounding pharmacies have used all these loopholes to infringe upon that patent, make the drugs, sell them cheaper to people, and say it's all in the name of personalization because they changed the dose by 10% or they added vitamin
Yeah.
B12 to it.
They had peptides, of
It's
course.
yeah, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's BS.
Yeah.
They're in the money-making business. It's not about access. And I understand that these drugs, yes, they should be cheaper. I wish that it didn't, I'm spending a lot more money on it than all of you are, I promise you. And my pharmacy's getting crushed on it. But the greater scheme of things is that it's going to lead to American companies no longer investing in new drugs, and America leads the world in drug development. Ozempic never would have been invented if these companies weren't able to patent the drugs that they came out with 20 years ago. So I'm really, really concerned about what happens if Hims winds up winning this battle with Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. I think this is the biggest story in medicine that is happening right before our eyes. The government has to step in and say this is not okay. And if that's what happens, and as it should, then these compounding companies are over. I mean, Hims's entire business is held up by the GLP compounding. They can say whatever they want, but that is their business.
And they already pulled their pill, right? They already pulled that.
Yeah, it's funny. Before I hopped on with you, I was scrolling on Instagram, and there's a company, another compounding pharmacy, a lesser known one called Willow, that's still advertising. They sell.
I'm very familiar with them. They are so sketchy.
Yeah, they sell a semaglutide. They've been selling a
Yeah.
semaglutide pill for a year. And I'm like, how has the government not shut this company down?
I don't know.
And that's another story. The FDA is
They're
gutted
so
and they don't have
sketchy.
oversight. But how are they allowed to? I mean, I get every drug advertisement because that's all the stuff that I search all day long. But how are they allowed to advertise to a 17-year-old kid on Instagram a semaglutide pill that we know doesn't work? They just shut Hims down for it.
I'll put
It's
in the
really
show notes
crazy.
I worked with some students on a project looking at the GLP-1 virtual prescribers, and they were just by far the most problematic because of the way they were advertising. It was just really irresponsible. So awesome. Well, we are almost out of time. I want to spend the last few minutes we have together with some rapid fire answers. So just keep your answers short.
Yeah. I gotcha.
Okay. What is one over-the-counter product that you just love, that you just think really, really works? And then what is one that you feel like just doesn't work and shouldn't be sold?
So the first one, I'll give a shout out to my dad, is Voltaren gel. He's the #1 consumer of Voltaren gel in the world.
Which is what?
Voltaren gel is diclofenac. So it's like supercharged Advil. It's an NSAID. It just went over the counter recently, and it's the best anti-inflammatory. So he's a big runner, so he loves putting it on his knees.
Okay.
And that's a big help. And then one that doesn't work, but I feel like we know this, I'd say Pepto-Bismol, which is one of the go-to drugs for people in the world because it's pink and it used to be on TV all the time, but I don't think it really does anything.
Okay, good to know. What is the weirdest thing someone's asked you for behind the counter?
Man, that is a really good question. I would just say that the #1 thing we are asked in the pharmacy every single day, multiple times a day, are questions about poop. You would be shocked how many times a day people are showing us pictures of their poop, asking us what they can do, how to get it out. And
there's got to be
just
an app for that by
constant.
now. Upload a picture and just leave the humans out of it. It feels
Yeah, you would think so.
like a gut doctor could make that. And a little more serious question: if you could make one healthcare law today, what would it be?
100% eliminate rebates. Rebates should be illegal. There's no reason for them. That's actually, I steal that answer every time I'm asked it from Mark Cuban because that's the answer he's given many times, anytime I've listened to him. And I agree 100%. There's a million things that need to be done to fix healthcare, but that would be the most impactful by far.
Yeah. the number one item you sell?
In the store, I would say that it's our CO Bigelow Rose Salve, which is a formula that dates back almost to 1850, I believe, and it can be used for anything. A lot of the stuff that we make in the store, like commercially sell, is based on these old formulas that we have in the pharmacy
Mhm.
that we used to make, and a rose salve was like one of the most iconic original apothecary items.
And my last question is, I know that David Bowie came into your store a lot when you were a kid, and I'm a huge fan. Please tell us, what was he like in person?
Yeah, so I'm also, I would say I'm a huge music fan. My number one and 1A people ever are David Bowie and Lou Reed, and they were both frequent customers of the pharmacy. Lou Reed came in like twice a week forever, and he was exactly as you would expect him to be. Not the nicest guy, but that was what was charming about him. Bowie, I only saw a couple of times. He didn't come to the store that often, but I'll tell you a quick anecdote that when I was like 15 years old, I was doing deliveries because I grew up working in the pharmacy and I would fill in for the delivery guy. And I was a big David Bowie fan at the time, but like it never occurred to me that his real name is not David Bowie. His name is David Jones. And I was making a delivery to David Jones and he answered the door and I like had a heart attack. I was not expecting it. I was caught off guard. I wish I could tell you like I said something cool, but I kind of just froze and handed him
Yeah.
his bag and
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Awesome. Well, Alec, thank you for all you do educating us. I'm going to put your newsletter into the show notes because everybody needs to subscribe and get themselves educated on what is happening in pharmacy. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we say goodbye?
last is just appreciate your pharmacist, get to know your pharmacist. I think we're heading in a direction where a lot of them are going to be eliminated, and you won't realize how good you have it until they're
Mm,
gone. I think we're losing the health
that's so
care
sad.
and the human. We're losing the care aspect, the human aspect of health care. And there's a reason that bedside manner is such an important skill that they teach doctors and pharmacists in school because that's just as important as the actual facts. And I think as we move towards a very health technology focused world, let's make sure that we're not losing the human aspect of care as well. It's a good thing to have human beings who are responsible for the decisions in your health.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Great to talk to you.